Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Alta Live. I am so excited to welcome you that you are all joining us for today's conversation on Tahoe's bear problem. This is fascinating. If you're like me, if you live within driving distance of Tahoe, you have absolutely been there and heard all about, if not seen a bear, certainly heard about bears interacting with humans and the dangerous problem it's become. Today, we're going to talk with Jordan Fisher Smith about that. Jordan wrote a fascinating piece, um, The Battle Over Black Bears. He wrote it for the current issue, and we're going to talk all about it today. I know it's a little controversial. We're going to have fun with it. And I'm just so excited to welcome him. So I hope that you've come with questions, with excitement. A bit about Jordan. He spent 21 years as a park and wilderness ranger in California. He's the author of the memoir Nature Noir, A Park Ranger's Patrol in the Sierra, and Engineering Eden, a violent death, a federal trial, and the struggle to restore nature in our national parks, which won a California Book Award and was longlisted for the Penn E.O. Wilson Award for Literary Science Writing. He lives in the Northern Sierra Nevada, and we are absolutely delighted to welcome him to today's Alta Live. But before I talk bears with Jordan, I would just like to do my, if you come every week, you hear this, and hopefully you're a subscriber. If you're new to us, Alta Journal is an award-winning quarterly magazine focused on California and the West. I was at the LA Times Festival of Books this weekend, and someone said, is this all about books? We're a lot about books, but we're also about things like the Tahoe bear problem. We've got, I mean, it's a big, gorgeous story that you can dig into here and online. We've got cartoons, we've got everything. We host weekly events like this. Alta Live is every Wednesday at 12:30. California Book Club is exciting. It's wonderful. We've got all sorts of interesting authors. That's once a month on the third Thursday. And those events are free. So we hope you can support us by subscribing to our magazine, joining us as a member. It's $50 a year. You get 4 gorgeous issues of Alta as well as a special gift on us. So please do consider supporting the work we do so we can keep doing it. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask questions of our guest. Please use that or the chat to pose any questions that you have. This interview will be recorded and posted to Alta Online later this afternoon. We're also going to email it to you, as well as links to Jordan's article, and anything else that pops up during our conversation today. It is great to see so many folks: Ukiah, Texas, LA, Cambria, California, South City. Hello and welcome everyone. South Carolina, welcome to you all. It's always so great to see. I am in North Bay, Marin County. Jordan, where are you zooming in from today?
I'm in Nevada City, of all places,
Of all places, Nevada.
and
Well, welcome.
it's great bear habitat.
Great. Well, good. Then, well, you're our guy to talk about the Tahoe bear problem today. Um, First things first, I want you to kind of set the lay of the land for us. We had an opportunity to chat as we began. Can you tell us when this problem started? There have always been bears in Tahoe. When did the human interaction begin to become a real problem, and bears kind of rewiring their brains to be less afraid of humans and rely on humans uh, as a food source?
Well, I talked to a really excellent naturalist, somebody who's so skillful that a lot of the professional biologists regard him as a colleague. And he started living in South Lake Tahoe in this sort of city streets of and cabins of South Lake Tahoe in the early 80s. And he said at that time you just didn't see bears. You heard about people seeing bears. Uh, Trash was out in old style, plastic or metal cans. They were not turned over. There just wasn't really a problem. And it sort of picked up as time went on. Part of this is the vast number of people who not only live around the lake, but visit it, the greater number who visit. And many of those people come without any, connection or experience with wildlife. So they regard animals as pets like pets, and they're likely to feed a bear just to get closer to it, or just drop their stuff when they're finished, throw their trash out. And I think it just kind of built and built, and it really, since the 80s, it's gotten much more severe. You said it was a bear problem. I kind of regard it as a people problem, really.
Well, you did. You said in your article, in fact, I underlined it, that
Hmm.
this isn't a people versus bears problem. This is a people versus people about bears problem. Can you help me
Well,
understand?
this article that I did for Alta started when a colleague of mine, a retired professor, really highly regarded botanist and Sierra local, called me up one day and he said, there's a war going on between people and bears in Lake Tahoe. And I think that's how that started circulating around Alta's editorial offices, and pretty soon battle or war kind of language, got into this article. And my surprise was, as when I went and began working on it, was that it really wasn't a bear versus people story. It was a people versus people story about bears. What do we do about it is what the fight is.
And all right, so before we get into the fight of it, let's talk about kind of the science behind what the problem is. And while you explain this to us, I'm going to share some photos so that we can kind of get a little bit of a visual sense of what's going on, if you don't mind. All right, so explain to me right now, basically, bears have grown to be a problem. There's a lot, Tahoe is a huge kind of part-time residential community. There's a core group of about 20,000 or so people that live in South Lake Tahoe. But then there's an influx during the vacationing season, the spring, summer, fall months of tourists or people who have a second home there. What has changed with the bears in the past 40 years, biologically, that
Really,
has,
a question for you. Should I be seeing what you're looking at right now with your
I'm
share
about to
screen?
start it. I'm
Oh,
about to
okay.
start it. You're
Yeah.
gonna see it. We're all gonna see it.
Okay.
We're all gonna get a
Yeah.
bear right here. All right.
Yeah. Okay. So this is an American black. Oh, isn't this a beautiful photo? Chris Hardy and I were lucky enough to go for a walk with a Forest Service biologist. And at this time, this is now the autumn, last autumn, and this beautiful bear is feeding on pine nuts, and you can see the cones that are open around it. And pine nuts are, I mean, you've had them in Italian food. They're really high protein and good and full of fat for this bear's winter torpor. Uh, how did this change and how did it start? One thing is just the sheer number of people and bears. We have a population in California of some 50 to 81,000 bears. That's a big range, isn't it? And part of that is that traditionally, bear numbers were estimated based on hunter success. So people bought bear tags, they went out and hunted. Wardens would take note of how many bears were shot in a given area and make an estimate of the population in that area. So this range of 50 to 81,000 bears, that's still a lot of bears. And we have 40 million people. And these two species are not separate the way we imagine, or the environment is not separate from us as we imagine. Can I just digress for just a moment about this?
Sure.
Okay. So, you know, in between the time I received the contract from Alta and the time I sent it back the following Monday, I was um, I was in Nevada City. It was a Saturday night. It was around midnight. It was about 200 yards from my home, and a black bear like this one was walking east up the Deer Creek Canyon toward a place where the Deer Creek Canyon, which is a wildlife corridor, intersects a chunk of freeway. The freeway was built in the bigger and better 60s as an alternate route to get major trucking and traffic out of the middle of this Victorian town. And today it moves through the town in a great concrete trench that makes a couple of S curves as it goes through the town. Uh, this black bear was headed for the freeway. At the same time, one of those Sprinter vans was headed into that freeway area, and it was dark. The pine trees on either side of the road were crowding out the moonlight, and this S curve ended, and suddenly there was a bear in the headlights. This guy, a local policeman, was doing what he always did on a Saturday night at that time, and waiting for drunks to leave the bars. And he heard the boom as the van hit the bear. He called his sergeant, Joe Bush, and the two of them, Jesse Burmeister and Joe Bush, went down there and were almost on the scene in a minute. The bear was dead on the shoulder. The van was destroyed. And the two guys got out of their patrol cars and began laying out flares to route traffic around the accident. That's when a 28-year-old drunk came down through the S turns and ran through the flares, hit both officers, knocking them unconscious, and tearing the part of the ear off on one of them. One of those guys came to and called for help, and the drunk was arrested on the scene. The being hit by cars is one of the main causes of mortality in wild bears, including this kind of bear right here. But beyond that, the idea that these two species are somehow separate or can be considered separately in the same
Humans and
piece of
bears
ground.
being the two species.
I beg your pardon?
Humans and bears being the two species.
Yeah, that's right. Humans and bears can't be considered separately living in the same place. They are tied together in intricate ways. This is what I learned in writing this article and with my experience with them. And
More intricate ways than we're tied with other animals.
all the wild animals that live around us, we have many species. Bears are particularly adaptable to living around people. They do well in the suburbs.
Why?
Well, because they're such wonderful omnivores, they can eat so many different things by season. And so they're very adaptable about what they eat, where they go. They're really excellent at their job, which is just to get fat, And so any kind of idea that these two species, human beings and bears, could be considered separately is a mirage founded on a kind of lack of imagination or lack of foresight, just like the freeway, which wasn't built to accommodate a bear crossing.
So these bears, I'm curious. I mean, as we read your article, there's various bear encounters that start off amusing. A bear rummaging, stealing
Right,
a bag of marshmallows, a bear breaking
right,
into
right.
someone's garage, remembering the same garage to go back to time and time again. There are residents that have had to replace their sliding glass doors, there's refrigerators. There are people who decided to install cameras, and as you pointed out, that just provides them with the opportunity to watch a bear destroy
A
their
real-time chance to watch their house being demolished
house.
while they're back in the Bay Area.
But ultimately it became very dangerous, and it's become fatal for people. And I've got a couple of pictures of just the destruction that a bear can cause on kind of our human possessions
I saw
and
many,
ultimately our
many
bodies.
cars like that as a ranger, many cars. Bears
Yeah.
were just trash cars. I mean, and
Why are
sometimes it was a
bears?
candy wrapper that was in there, right?
That's all that would
Yeah,
prompt
the,
them
the
to destroy
smell,
a
just the
condo.
smell, right?
But so why are bears going to people's houses instead of foraging for berries and honeys and whatever else they want in the woods? Why are they so determined to get into homes now?
Well, a couple of things. One, you saw those pine cones a moment ago when we were looking at the beautiful photo that Chris Hardy took of the bear feeding on pine nuts. Still, who wants to chew up a pine cone when you've got a half a gallon of milk, a steak, and some ice cream, right? Uh, human beings live on top of a pyramid of food production that starts at the bottom with, a huge amount of fossil fuels and nitrogen and phosphorus, and gets us things like, wheat and corn from the Midwest, and apricots and figs from Turkey, right? And we have so much food that our garbage is very nutritious.
Mm.
Bears can get fat on garbage, uh, just from the leftovers that we throw out. So why would a bear want to struggle, dig up a ground squirrel den or dig up a root in the spring, when they could get through a sliding glass door into a kitchen and tear apart a refrigerator, right?
I mean, yeah, I get it. I guess I'm just amazed at the bear's ability to adapt so quickly to the human environment, to open a door as opposed to just barrel through it. They open the refrigerator doors.
Yeah, they're nimble and
They're nimble, and they're
yeah.
also I come at this with a naive. I've never been a park ranger. I've never been a scientist. Um aren't, bears are precious and darling, and we grow up reading books about them. And, we've done bears are it's a the grizzly bear is the state, it's on our flag. Bears are charming and adorable. Um, and no bear has ever broken into my house, although I don't have a home in Tahoe. But explain to me, I guess, why bears are so it's become people versus people over bears.
Well,
And we'll see a
here's
lot of
another
questions.
thing about bears. They have a lot of what we'd call behavioral plasticity, meaning they can change what they do based on what we do. And again, this accident I was talking about, we're so intermingled, the two species living on the same piece of ground. And essentially, bears naturally regard people as dominant bears. A bear that hasn't had a lot to do with people will run from a human being. They can be convinced not to by any kind of food reward, right? So if, for example, they come up to your house and tear apart your bird feeder and eat all the seed or whatever kind of nice winter, the peanut butter blocks that you put up, uh, that might encourage them to come back. And next time they might go up on your deck and see if there's a bowl of cat food. Or if you didn't clean out your grill and there's that fatty carbon deposit all over the grill, they'll tear that apart. And then maybe it's a kind of progressive process of losing their natural fear of people.
Yeah.
And that's really what's happened with bears, not only at Tahoe, but a lot of other places. The difference is, one thing that characterizes Tahoe is that pressure groups, notably animal rights pressure groups, have absolutely insisted that we must not do away with bears who start going into houses and tearing apart houses. Uh, and there's a fundamental breach in society between people that say, I don't really want to face a bear at night in my living room, and people who say, hey, it's a natural animal, it's just doing what it does. It shouldn't have to pay for it.
So who are give me both sides of the people versus people issue.
So really what I think this was for me, the heart of this story as I began to work on it was the fundamental attitudes or philosophy between these two groups of people. I characterize one of them as ecological conservation, or includes most of the biologists who are working on the issue for the government, most of the biologists who have to respond to these incidents when they happen. Uh, they believe, first of all, I heard a lot of appreciation for the animals from these people. They love the animals. They don't go out there to kill animals. However, when an animal gets progressively more bold, and you have a situation like the two people who were in the Keys in that story of mine, and were left their door open and suddenly were facing a mother with a cub in their house. Uh, this means that the government, the wildlife agencies are sort of compelled to do something about it. And that's something, the dirty little secret of bear management has always been at the end point of all this failure to control our food and control our garbage is a dead bear. And that bear, was euthanized because its behavior became more and more aggressive toward people and in some
And they
cases
know it's
injured
this,
people.
sorry, and they know it's the same bear because these home invasions they actually do DNA testing to track
Well, that was
certain bears.
an effect of the other group that I was going to mention, which is the animal rights people. The animal rights people said you simply can't do away with bears. They're just doing what bears want to do. They're wild animals. We shouldn't kill them for doing what they, are sort of built to do. Uh, those people put so much pressure, political pressure on state government in California and Nevada, that Lake Tahoe is the only place where animals are getting dossiers built on their genetic material. So we have the, exact number of break-ins that a bear has done. Uh, the biologist that I was working with showed me smears of bear paw prints on people's doors and on their garage doors and stuff. And he said, we can make a DNA profile out of that smear of muddy footprint. Uh, so essentially, the political situation at Tahoe has resulted in a force that essentially turned Tahoe into a CSI environment for bears, where you have these dossiers of exactly how many homes this bear has entered and what they did while they were there.
What are the rules now on a problem bear? Isn't there's a bear with a name? Is it Hank the Tank?
You
I'm
know,
certain bears that have become,
Hank the Tank was what the biologists call a celebrity bear. That this became a bear that everybody knew. It wasn't actually Hank, it was a Henrietta. It's a
oh,
female bear. It had a couple of cubs. It was over 500 pounds or greater, on human food, broke into a lot of houses in South Lake Tahoe and became a cause celeb. And there was a huge fight over what to do with it. The the Bear League, which is an animal rights organization there, said this bear must live. We can't do away with it. It's just doing what bears do. And eventually it was shipped out of state to a refuge in Colorado where it lives out its life. It'll never be back in the wild again.
presumably though that can't happen with the thousands of bears that live around
There
Tahoe.
just aren't enough places. You can't, there really aren't places to put experienced housebreaker bears. There are some cub rehabilitation centers here in California and elsewhere. There is some placement of cubs when they're motherless cubs, but there simply isn't any place to put bears that have become um, used to breaking into people's homes and chasing the people.
So, so there's what does the government do now, or what is whoever, first of all, who's in charge of handling a problem bear? Whose jurisdiction does that fall under?
So each state has a wildlife department. It's the same department generally that Department of Conservation or Department of Wildlife that is responsible for hunting and fishing. And they usually handle the when there's a problem. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife set up some special purpose biologists to respond specifically to bear problems. So they had, at the time I was working on this story, they had two of them working in Tahoe for the whole west shore of the lake, all the California part, and they were hopping. They were busy. And essentially, these people are called conflict biologists,
I love
and
that
they're
name.
set up just to respond to bear problems. So, just to give you an idea of the potential for conflicts in the state as a whole in 2022, there were some 1,000 conflicts between people and bears.
Wow. So like three
In
a day.
Yeah, in the year that I was working on, where we could get enough figures, there was over 600 incidents of conflicts around the west side of Lake Tahoe, and of those, about a third were what they call home invasions, which sounds like gangsters coming to your
Yeah.
house. But the bears are sort of gangsters in that way.
So, so the issue is to euthanize a bear that has, I mean, is there some kind of rule?
There
Like,
are multiple levels of approval. This thing has to
okay.
go through signatures and then signatures and signatures. It's pretty much like death row in a penitentiary. It's
Oh,
days of execution and public outrage, and
yeah, yeah.
it's very difficult to now in Tahoe to kill a bear.
Is that so? But is there some, and I realize that I'm, coming at this. Is there some kind of like if bear DNA, if say Henrietta the bear's DNA is traced to five different home invasions, is there a
Okay,
number?
Hank the Tank, the one you were talking about,
Yes, yeah.
21
All right. So
house
is there
break-ins.
a number for when you get the California Fish and Game death penalty
Not that I know of.
begins?
It's a question of the field biologist writing it up and saying, we have this problem, we have this problem, we've documented this, what shall we do? And one field biologist told me that it took 3 months in one case just to get an approval to do away with a bear that was constantly breaking in with houses.
Well, and once a bear, they kind of decide, okay, this bear has become so much of a problem that it's dangerous. Then they got to go find the bear, right?
Yeah, the biologists are pretty good at that,
I
and
bet.
and the good biologists know where the bears are.
Sure.
One of the places that they are, for example, was that on garbage day in the Tahoe Keys, um, the bears were out in force an hour before the garbage trucks, right? That essentially they're
They
good at
knew the
this.
time.
The biologists know where the bears are going to be based on what's happening.
That's incredible that the bears know what time when I
We
mean,
have to
smarter
give
than
them
my
credit
husband
for
knowing when
being
to
really
bring the
good at
garbage.
their job. They're very smart creatures. One of the things when I was a park ranger working with bears, we would take a bear, and in those days we'd still try to relocate them, right?
Mhm.
Relocation is something the public doesn't understand, is a terrible failure. That you may have heard of a bear getting tranquilized and moved. Generally speaking, if it was moved someplace where just it could cool off for a few hours without running into the next, you know, garbage opportunity. But the wholesale transportation of bears to some other place really has stopped because it was a failure. And one reason it was a failure is that bears are amazing navigators, in the same sense that migratory geese or ducks know where to go. These capacities in wildlife are highly developed, and bears came back, right? In my book, Engineering Eden, which has a lot to do with bears, the rangers in Yosemite got frustrated because they would move a bear, and literally the bear would be back before the trap got towed back. Uh,
What do the animal activists want to see happen? What do they suggest as a solution?
their focus has been on a good thing, which is about making sure that we control access to garbage,
Hmm.
making sure that our homes are secure. One of the things that's uncontroversial right now is electric devices that give bears shock, a non-lethal shock, such as what's called an unwelcome mat, which is a mat that sits in front of your door that has electric parts on it and gives the bear a shock and says, "Don't come here." There are wires that go around the windows. These things are both groups, both the ecological conservation contingent and the animal rights people, both approve of measures like that. They don't hurt the bear. They do help people secure their homes. Uh, but you still have a contingent of bears that will want to go and do stuff. And the question is, what do we do with them?
What do the bear activists want to do with them?
Let them be.
Oh.
And
I mean, technically they were there first. You say in your article that the bear But some of the bear activists, I mean, it's gotten pretty nasty. There was a need for a
I should say, to be fair to the animal rights activists, they also are involved in chasing bears off. They have volunteers who will go out and help homeowners chase a bear off. The thing about a bear that's chased off is it's temporarily chased off, right?
right.
And the volunteer will go home. They might give some valuable advice about getting an unwelcome mat. They even loan them out. Both the state of California and the animal rights people loan people unwelcome mats to try out, and maybe then they'll get permanent fixtures.
The fight over what to do about these bears between the people, as you point out, has has gotten a bit nasty.
Oh yeah.
And people have needed restraining orders. Those who have chosen to call, um, a government organization as opposed to a bear activist have received threats online. Um, there's some language I couldn't use in Alta Live that's been shared in the article.
Well,
They get very, very angry if a homeowner or similar um, takes action that they disagree with. How is this? I mean, what's the end goal here? Can you think of, is there some kind of proposed compromise on the table, or are they just going to keep fighting until one faction wins?
well, the state of California just this month now has finalized and published its bear conservation plan. And one of the things the state is going to do is to manage bears and people in regions. So Lake Tahoe is the most difficult one, where you have to get a DNA record to euthanize a bear. But the political, situation is different in different parts of California. If you go to California's far northeast, it's much more like Montana, right, in terms of people's attitudes, the way people see this issue, whereas Tahoe is highly political and urban in a way, right? A lot of the people who have homes there are essentially urban people, and so that's one thing the state's going to do. Uh, and then there's the question that maybe we'll get grizzlies, and if we don't have enough trouble already with black bears.
Oh, well,
I think you did an interview about that,
we did. Doug Peacock has written about this for Alta
right?
Journal and come on
Right.
Alta Live and talked about it. We will include my wonderful colleague Liz is helping take notes, and we will include links to Alta's other coverage on bears, which is substantial.
Yeah, Pete Aragona, I think, or Pete, yeah, Alagona from UC Santa Barbara
Yes,
was profiled, and you actually, I think, did an interview
I
with
did an
him.
interview with him as well. Yeah, bear
He
stuff.
wants to bring grizzlies back.
He wants to, he wants to consider the possibility of reintegrating grizzlies to California, to which they are native. I mean, it's a complex question. We're not going to answer in Alta Live, but technically, the bears were here first.
Right, but that was a long time ago, and the
I get it.
situation has changed.
I get it. I like going
And
to Tahoe. I don't want to get eaten by a
yeah,
bear.
40 million people, the idea that we can put bears in some remote place, there is no remote place in California.
Yeah.
And the other thing about us and bears is that we visualize travel in a lineal sense. Bears see in 3 dimensions. So for them, if they're walking down an asphalt road, they're also aware of what's out down the side embankment and what's in the other embankment, or they might just veer off and go that way. They see a map-like view of the world that's much more rich with detail, and they know everything.
Do bears, I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to dive into our audience questions. Um, can a bear be, once its brain has rewired to know when garbage day is, to know which houses in the Tahoe Keys have the best peanut butter or the easiest access to their garage full of dog food.
Mhm.
If a bear is relocated to the wilderness or shooed away, can its brain reverse wire and go back to foraging for berries or squirrels' dens? Or will it always want that? Have we gotten them addicted to Oreos?
Well, first of all, relocated again. Um, I worked on a bear. I think the first bear I ever worked on, tranquilized and measured and all that, walked from Sequoia Kings Canyon National Park all the way to Yosemite, had some cubs up there, lived there for a while, and then walked all the way back. Uh, in terms of relocating a bear to the wilderness, there's really no place in California that you can send a bear that it can't really get someplace from to find cabins and other people's houses. Then to answer the second part of your question, there's a lot of interest in aversive conditioning and in hazing. The state of Nevada has equipped its conflict biologists, the people who go out on bear calls, with Karelian bear dogs, which are a Finnish, like Finland species that was used to protect livestock and so on there. And when they catch a bear and release it, they'll send the dog after it, and the dog will nip at it to try to bring the bear to have some fear of people again. But really, you know, aversive conditioning works well with cubs and yearlings and young bears that haven't had a lot of experience, haven't really gotten over their fear of people. Then you kind of enforce that fear. But animals that have been, they're grown up bears that break into houses, we've had absolutely no success in getting them to stop. It's
Fascinating.
a one-way trip for a bear from being an animal that's scared of people and doesn't eat human food to being a dead bear.
Wow. All right. The powerful sentence, Jordan. I want to dive in to some questions. Carrie asks, do bears communicate with each other about, say, garbage day or really good food spots in human areas? Or are they territorial and protective of their finds?
That's such a good question because I meant to mention um, that bears have a matrilineal culture that cubs are brought up by their mothers over a period of about a year and a half until they become a yearling and get kicked out of the nest. Essentially, they learn everything that the mother learns how to do, and they watch and learn. And so the ability, sorry about that. I thought I turned that off. Uh, so they watch and learn, and over time, the knowledge of where you get human food and where there's garbage and all of that gets transferred from the sows or the mothers through the babies, and they grow up and transfer it to their cubs.
So it's passed down generationally.
Matrilineally, it's a matrilineal culture.
Matrilineally. New word for me. Fascinating. All right, more questions. Um, okay, so obviously we kind of all agree that the many experts around this and the bear activists and the biologists um keep bears out of your home, keep them out of your trash. How exactly do we do that? The one thing I noticed in your article is that the bear-proof garbage cans, which people are required to purchase, cost $2,000. It is not inexpensive to bear-proof one's.
Well, not everybody's required to have them yet. And this is one of the problems is that rentals and new homes have to have them, but existing homes sometimes don't. So it's still a porous system. And you have dumpsters that theoretically are supposed to be locked and closed and sometimes are left open. At one point, as the bears repopulated from California into Nevada, where they were almost extinct, South Lake Tahoe's casino, right at state line there, had the highest population of bears in a small area in the United States, says the man who studied them at the time. But essentially, it's a situation that's fluid right now. And
Yeah.
one thing we know is that if we allow a bear to become bold enough to do what this one bear did and eat a woman, which we know about now, happened in the fall of 2023 in Downeyville, we, we are faced uh, with a decision that a lot of people really don't want to make.
Which is, do we kill the bears or just work on preventative measures? Is
Yeah,
that
and I mean, you can't prevent a bear from charging somebody, right? In other
Right.
words, if the bear is the kind of bear that wants you to drop your lunch, it will charge you and get you to drop your lunch and run away. And that could happen anywhere, right? So you can't post somebody to prevent it. You can electrify entrances to buildings, but the other kinds of behaviors as bears get aggressive, you can't really prevent them so well.
So what are the next steps for the people of Tahoe? Is there something coming up? Is there a vote? Is there are we in
Well,
a
the bear management
standstill?
plan or the bear conservation plan has just been, finalized. That'll give a framework. The other thing is, better population numbers. We know that there's somewhere between 50,000 and 81,000 bears in California. That's kind of a big, between,
Yes.
right? So they're going to do more things like hair traps. Hair trap is like a double-sided sticky tape or a little loop of barbed wire that hangs in a path where a bear goes by, and just the hair that brushes off can be a DNA profile, so we know, yep, we got another bear in that area. So we're going to
I'm
try to.
amazed at how much DNA work is done on these bears.
Well, the DNA lab I was talking about just now was established as a criminal lab in the Sacramento region area, and it was converted into this use uh, uh, out of need because of the political situation in Tahoe. So now we have a certainty about how many houses this bear has broken into because of the political pressure that was put on the government.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. It does make sense, though, that Tahoe is kind of more politicized just by the nature of who's living there and who's visiting there. Um, City folk. Interesting. This is
Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah,
Let me dive into one more question and then
sure.
we've gone over. Will asks, the bears we were talking about are black bears. What happened to brown bears, or grizzlies? We know grizzlies are up in Montana. They're extinct in California, but are they much more aggressive or less aggressive than black bears? Or
This is another thing I meant to talk about, that we had a preview of what was going to happen at Tahoe in our national parks. In 1929 alone, there were 81 uh, injuries in Yosemite from bears, just from
81?
bears. 81 in 1929. By 1933, they were sending in bear dogs to work with the rangers to try to scare bears off. By 1960, Yellowstone had some 358 injuries to people from interactions with bears, and they were mostly black bears. Black bears are much more comfortable and adaptable about getting close to people over time. Grizzlies have a record of kind of keeping their distance and every once in a while eating one of us, but which is what happened in Yellowstone. We didn't have a fatality for years, and we had hundreds of black bear scratches, and people would hold up food, and the bear would climb the person to get the food, right, and claw them. So, you know, grizzlies, that's another whole thing, and it was another show that you already did. But
Yeah, but they,
but grizzlies are in Europe. Europe,
yes,
the EU now has grizzlies, and been a little bit of a problem over there in places.
we do love the bear drama at Alta. Is so I mean, I guess just to fully answer it, black bears tend to be the most,
They're sociable. Let's
yeah,
say they're
willing to
naturally scared of people, but
get
easily
close to humans.
convinced to come closer to get food.
Interesting.
Grizzlies generally haven't been the kind of animal that will come up and feed from people's hands.
And grizzlies are brown bears.
Yes, the brown bear and the grizzly are the same bear. Yeah.
Got it, got it. Um,
And by the way, black bears come in lots of colors, and I've seen blonde black bears. So they're black, they're brown. The beautiful
yeah,
photo that Chris took, that's a black bear, but it's got a kind of a cinnamon brown look to it.
yeah.
And I,
How can you
I
tell it's a black bear then?
yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, they're just slightly smaller. The other thing is that they have a dog-like face. A grizzly has a flat face, almost dished face. A black bear has a longer snout and a kind of dog-like bone structure. The other thing is grizzly kind of has a hump, shoulder hump, and black
Like in
bears
the
don't as
California
much.
flag.
Yeah.
as the shoulder hump.
Yeah, you can see a grizzly still to this day if you go to the Lawrence, no, the Cal Academy of Sciences
Sure. San
in
Francisco.
Golden Gate Park, and Monarch, which was the name of a grizzly that was captured by Will Hurst's grandfather, or made to be, he got people to do it and put on display, is now stuffed, and you can see a California grizzly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, at the
I've seen that grizzly. I didn't know that Will's grandpa had him
that was a publicity
taxidermied.
stunt that Will's grandpa did. Monarch was the name of that bear, and it was
Monarch.
supposed to resemble Monarch, the monarch of the dailies, which was the newspaper.
Fascinating. Jordan Fisher Smith, you are so interesting, so knowledgeable. I'm so grateful for you taking the time to do this interview twice. 2 weeks ago, Zoom crashed around the globe.
Who
Um,
knew it could happen?
who knew it could? It's certainly never happened before. I'm so grateful to you for coming back and to so much of our audience for coming back and making the time for this topic. I mean, we could talk about bears all
I
day
wish we
long.
got a chance to get to some of these other questions. Yeah.
Is there one more that you want to grab?
You tell me. You pick
Um,
one.
okay. Uh, we have bears who come down to Monrovia. Are these the same species as the bears in Tahoe? Can Monrovia serve as a contrast to the conditions in South Lake Tahoe?
Good question. They're all black bears here. We have at present we have no brown bears in California. So that's it. And coastal environments are very rich for wildlife. Um, One of the problems with moving bears to the wilderness that we were talking about, people imagine you could fly a bear into the middle of Yosemite where it's really away from roads and houses and people. The problem is there's not much to eat up there for a bear. The beautiful high country that we like, when we go backpacking in California, these endless vistas of stone and water and snow. There's not a lot of stuff to eat. And the really great bear habitat is down at the edge of the national park or outside it in the foothills and the low Sierra, where there's just more stuff. And that happens to be where all the cabins and all the
Yeah.
and the people are. So it's hard to get a bear away from people in California.
Um, guys, this has been fascinating. Jordan, we're gonna have to
Thank
have
you.
you back. I know we're gonna do more bear stuff. There's no Alta if there's no bear stuff. In fact, our creative director has suggested I dress up as a bear for some of my events just because it's so synonymous with Alta. I'll do it. But
Okay.
I'm so grateful to you for your expertise, for taking the time and your willingness to talk about this, as well as your fascinating and in-depth piece in our issue 31. Thank you, Jordan. And thank you to our wonderful audience for coming and being so chatty and engaged. This has been great. I hope that you will come back next week. We're going to talk about the different accents and dialects of the state of California. I've been accused of sounding like a Valley girl. I'm from Mill Valley, not the Valley. But we're going to talk about that with a professor next week. That's Wednesday, whatever the first Wednesday in May is. I hope you will join us for that. And again, Jordan Fisher Smith, thank you. Thank you. This has been really fun.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.